The gas station sat alone where the highway ran out of nerve. For hundreds of miles in both directions, the road cut through flat desert like a single pencil line on a blank page. Drivers joked that the station was not a stop, but a test. If you ignored it, the desert did not forgive. From a distance, it looked small and tired. 2 pumps, a low cinderblock building, a faded billboard that used to advertise soda and now mostly advertised the wind. The paint on the roof had peeled down to dull metal. The ice chest by the door rattled and hummed. Everything else stayed quiet. Most people only saw the place at speed. They noticed the sign that said, "Last gas for 120 miles," squinted, checked the fuel gauge, and either turned off or promised themselves they would be fine. Long-haul truckers knew better. They treated the station the way sailors once treated lighthouses. Not pretty, maybe, but important. Ray was one of those drivers. He'd been running the desert route for years. Petrochemicals, refrigerated goods, pallets of things he never bothered to name. Same miles, different loads. The gas station had become one of the few fixed points in a life made of motion. He knew the cracks in its parking lot better than the cracks in his own apartment ceiling. It was late afternoon when he rolled in that day, heat sitting on the hood of the truck like a weight. The air felt strange. The desert had its own language. Ray had learned to read it through the windshield. Heat shimmer meant nothing. Sudden birds meant water somewhere. Empty sky, dead radio chatter, and wind pressing against the cab all at once meant trouble. Today, the light looked too hard, the horizon too hazy. A dust storm kind of day. The sort of day you respected or regretted. He parked by the diesel pump and stepped down. Hot grit stuck to his boots. The smell of sun-baked rubber came off the tires. Inside the station building, the fan on the ceiling turned slow circles that did nothing for the air. The clerk, a thin man with a baseball cap and a permanent squint, slid a cold bottle across the counter. His eyes looked tired around the edges, like someone who had watched too many empty hours stack up. Ray took the bottle. The water inside clicked with small pieces of ice. That sound felt like mercy. Outside, under the narrow strip of metal awning, something moved. At first, Ray thought it was wind lifting a paper cup. Then the movement came again, slower, more careful. A small shape slid out from behind the ice chest and sat down in the shade. It was a puppy. Not the round, soft kind from greeting cards. This one was all edges and angles under a thin coat. Its ribs showed a little. Its paws were too big for its legs, ears half flopped, as if they had not decided what direction to choose. The fur was dust-colored, patchy brown and tan, the exact shade of the desert when the sun started to drop. The puppy watched Ray with dark, steady eyes. It did not wag its tail. It did not crawl forward or flinch back. It simply sat, as if waiting for someone who was late. Ray had seen strays at truck stops before. Tough, greasy dogs that lived on fries tossed out of windows. Nervous shadows that disappeared if anyone got too close. This one did not look like that. It looked freshly lost, too clean around the eyes, too hopeful. He asked in the office if the dog belonged to anyone. The clerk jerked his chin toward the parking lot and said that a small car had pulled in that morning, fast and nervous. A cardboard box had been left by the dumpster. When the clerk went outside to check, the car was gone and the box was empty. Only paw prints in the dust and one cheap blanket were left. The puppy had been in the shade ever since. It did not sleep. It watched the road, the pumps, the horizon. It watched drivers come and go with the calm attention of someone counting something invisible. The clerk said he had tried to give it water in a dish from the back. The puppy had sniffed it and turned its head away. It was not that it did not want water. It was that it seemed to be waiting for some other kind. Ray stepped back outside and looked at the puppy again. Hot wind pushed against his shirt. The edge of the sky had gone a little brown. A line of dust stood far away, like a wall marching closer. He topped off his tanks, checked the straps on his load, and paused for a moment longer than usual before climbing back into the truck. The puppy's eyes followed him to the cab door. When the engine started, the dog flinched once, not from fear, more like someone making a note. Ray pulled out of the lot and joined the thin line of highway again. For the next hour, he was alone on the road. The desert rose up on either side, low hills and dry washes and long, flat panels of nothing. The sky grew stranger. The light turned the color of old bones. Static began to whisper on the CB. Somewhere behind him, the gas station shrank to a dot, and then to memory. The storm caught him halfway to the next junction. It did not arrive slowly. One moment the world was dusty but manageable. The next moment the horizon vanished and the air turned into a moving wall. Sand slammed into the windshield in thick waves. The truck shuddered under a sudden punch of wind. Ray knew better than to try to outrun it. He slowed, eased the rig onto the shoulder, and kept the headlights and hazards on. The world outside turned the color of rust. The sun disappeared. The cab shook, a small metal box in a giant hand. Other trucks were caught too. Through the blur, Ray saw shapes materialize and stop. Headlights glowed, then faded behind curtains of dust. The radio filled with clipped words, half-sentences, people reporting locations and problems in voices that tried not to sound worried. The storm chewed at them for hours. When it finally thinned, it didn't really end. It turned into a long, yellow haze that made every distance look wrong. The air stayed hot and dry. The sense of direction felt slightly unhooked. The highway behind them was blocked by a jackknifed rig. The highway ahead had a warning about a washed-out section near a dry river crossing. The storm had moved the landscape just enough to confuse everyone. By the time Ray and the others limped back to the gas station, the sun was a heavy red coin low over the far hills. The station had turned into a kind of accidental harbor. Trucks filled the lot, lined up along the access road, parked on any scrap of gravel that did not tilt. Engines idled. Some had stalled during the worst of the storm and had to be coaxed back to life. Others had stayed on to keep air conditioning running in cabs that felt like ovens when the doors stayed closed. Inside the building, the electricity flickered. The storm had hit the lines. The pumps worked, but the coolers whined in complaint. The clerk looked more wrung out than before. Water became the problem faster than fuel. The tanks at the station were old. The well that had once fed them had gone dry years ago. Everything came in on a delivery schedule now. Bottled water for selling. A storage tank in the back for the taps and toilets. The delivery was late, thanks to the storm. The storage tank was low because of a heat wave. No one had planned for a sudden small village of trucks stranded at once. People bought what bottles they could. They shared, up to a point. Drivers split cases. A few poured water into bowls for the station cat that did not exist, and the stray dog that did. The puppy still sat in the shade, only now the shade was crowded. It had moved closer to the building. The storm had left fine grit on its fur. Someone had tied an old bandana loosely around its neck so people would not step on it in the confusion. The puppy ignored the cloth. Its eyes scanned the rows of trucks, the faces moving between them, the light above the desert. Ray refilled his own bottles and took one extra. He poured a little into a shallow piece of plastic and set it down near the dog. The animal looked at the water, then up at him, then back at the horizon. Its nose lifted. The wind had shifted again. Most of the truckers were tired. They wanted a clear road, a shower, and a bed. Some talked about pushing on anyway with half visibility. Others were already making the calculations in their heads: fuel, hours, schedules, how much they could bend the rules. The desert did not care. Under the strange, thick light, the land looked flatter than usual. Landmarks blurred. Old dry washes, normally harmless, could hide sudden drops where the storm had carved deeper channels. A driver who thought he was taking a simple detour could find himself nose down in gravel with wheels hanging. Ray stood near the edge of the lot and tried to decide. Behind him, he heard small paws on gravel. The puppy trotted past his boots and stopped at the very edge of the asphalt, where the man-made surface ended and the dirt began. It looked back once, as if checking that someone was watching, then stepped onto the bare earth. Its tail lifted, straight and sure. The puppy walked toward the open desert, not toward the highway, not along the road, straight out at an angle that made no sense if it was just wandering. It did not sniff around or zigzag like a dog following random scents. It moved in a clean line, only pausing every dozen steps to look back over its shoulder. When it looked back, its eyes searched faces, not empty air. No one in the lot moved. The day had already used up everyone's supply of decisions. Following a stray dog into the desert was not on anyone's sensible list. The drivers had enough trouble. The puppy kept going until it reached the low line where scrubby bushes began. There it stopped and turned fully around. It planted itself in the dust and stared at the humans. From where he stood, Ray could see the tension in its body. Not fear exactly. A tightness, like a drawn bow waiting for someone to notice the arrow. He thought about the way it had refused the shallow bowl, the way it had watched the storm build before anyone else noticed, the way it had stayed near the station all day, as if attached to the place by an invisible thread. He also thought about his own throat, already dry again even after the bottles, about the tank in the back that the clerk had said was almost empty now, about the broken highway ahead and the blocked highway behind. The clerk stood at the doorway, arms folded, eyes on the dog. The lines around his mouth had a new shape. He looked like a man who knew an old story and was trying very hard not to say it out loud. Ray asked, without words, with a small look. The clerk gave the kind of half shrug that meant both maybe and what else do we have. Ray picked up his almost empty bottle and started toward the puppy. He expected to feel foolish. Instead, he felt something more like relief. Doing nothing had become heavier than doing something. Two other drivers fell in beside him without comment. A woman with a sunburned nose and a faded company logo on her cap. A man who had once worked ranches before he ever drove long haul. Their boots crunched in the dust in sync. The puppy saw them coming and stood up. It did not run toward them. It did not dance with excitement. It simply turned again and moved forward, as if their decision had unlocked its next step. They followed. The heat hit harder once they left the thin layer of human-made ground. The air above the soil felt even more baked. Small dry plants scratched at their pant legs. The station shrank behind them faster than it should have, swallowed by the shimmering light. The puppy kept a steady pace. Not too fast for them, not slow enough to look random. Its path curved away from the highway, away from the usual tracks that led to nothing much. It threaded between low clumps of sage and brittle shrubs, climbed a slight rise, dropped into a shallow depression, climbed again. The desert here looked like all the rest. Flat, then not. Pale sand with darker streaks where old water had once run. No obvious destination. Ray's calves began to burn. Sweat rolled down his back, only to vanish in the heat. His bottle felt light in his hand. The second driver wiped a hand under his cap. The third scanned the horizon, old ranch habit, looking for any hint of structure. The puppy did not hesitate. Every time it crested one of the low rises, it paused for a fraction of a second and checked that the humans were still there. Its head tilted slightly. Its ears flicked. Then it continued, satisfied. They walked longer than they had planned, but shorter than a real hike. Time felt loose. The gas station became a flat square behind them, then a small gray shape, then something they felt more than saw. At the top of a slightly taller ridge, the puppy stopped. The ground fell away beyond it into a shallow basin, a natural bowl carved by forces that had moved too slowly for anyone alive to see. In the middle of that bowl, half swallowed by dust and scrub, stood a low circle of stones. In the center of the stones, hidden from the highway and from the station, was water. Not much. Not a lake. Not a river. A waterhole. It was a round concrete tank, waist-high, cracked around the edges, ringed with old hoof prints and bits of broken fence posts. At some point long ago, someone had built it to hold water for cattle or for road crews. A narrow metal pipe still slanted down into it from a higher rock face, bringing a thin but steady trickle from some forgotten spring. The surface of the water shone dark and cool in the strange light. For a moment, all three humans simply stared. The puppy trotted down the slope and stopped at the rim. It looked up at the people once more, then bent its head and drank with deep, slow pulls, as if answering a need it had been holding back all day. Ray felt his own throat tighten in a different way. He climbed down, knelt, and cupped his hands. The water felt cold against his skin. Real cold. Not just cooler than the air. It tasted of minerals and stone and time. The kind of taste that said it had been there long before the highway arrived and would stay long after the gas station went away. The rancher-turned-trucker checked the tank with a practical eye. It was not magical. It was old infrastructure. An old windmill that was gone now must have pumped water here once. The pipe still carried enough from an underground pocket to keep the tank from going dry. Sandstorms had hidden it for casual view. GPS did not care about it. Most humans had forgotten it was there. The puppy had not. Or maybe it had just been born closer to this tank than to any house, and had followed a scent back to the only water it knew. Maybe someone in the small car that had dumped the cardboard box had grabbed a pup from a place like this and driven until guilt or panic dropped it at the station. The detail stayed hazy. What mattered was that there was water. They filled the bottles. Careful, measured. They did not want to drain the tank. The rancher driver showed how to scoop from near the surface, without kicking up too much sediment. Ray poured slowly, listening to the hollow glug and feeling something in his chest loosen. On the way back, they left small markers, a strip of bright cloth tied to a scrub branch, a short line of stones laid in an arrow on the ground where the ground was bare. Little signals that tired eyes could catch from a distance if they knew to look. Back at the station, the first reaction was confusion. They returned dusty and sweating, carrying bottles that dripped at the neck. The puppy padded in front of them, tail slightly higher now. The clerk stepped outside. So did everyone else close enough to see. Ray raised one of the bottles and tilted it. Clear water flashed in the light. That got attention. The rancher driver explained in simple terms and with careful words. No drama, just facts. Old tank, hidden basin, markers. Enough to help, not enough to waste. If anyone wanted to walk out with him again, he would go. They went. Not all at once. In small groups. People who did not trust the story walked to see for themselves. People who had already decided to trust the puppy walked because they wanted to feel the air at that basin and know the way by heart. The storm-thrown day shifted shape. The station turned into a hub for something more than fuel and fast sugar. Drivers filled the coolers not only with bottled water from shelves, but with the desert's own offering, treated with respect. Eyes that had been dulled with worry brightened with a tight, practical hope. The puppy stayed near the doorway. It did not try to go with every group. It did not act like a hero or a mascot. It simply lay in the shade, head on its paws, watching each person who left and each person who returned, as if checking against a list only it could read. The clerk brought out the cardboard box from earlier and tore off the flaps, turning it into a flat bed. He set it in the best patch of shade and dropped the cheap blanket on top. The puppy ignored it for a while, then stepped onto it, turned in a small circle, and settled, still facing the open desert. As evening finally cooled the air, Ray sat on the edge of the concrete wheel stop in front of his truck and thought about maps. The company maps on his phone showed fuel stops, way stations, rest areas, repair shops. They did not show one cracked tank in a basin hidden from the road. The desert's map held different points: old wells, broken windmills, places where animals gathered when things got hard. For years, Ray had treated the gas station as a fixed point. Now he saw it as something else. A thin human layer over an older pattern. The puppy had not created the water. It had simply refused to forget it. The storm warnings on the radio the next day were worse. People decided to sit tight a little longer. The detour around the washed-out section took time to open. The jackknifed rig down the road needed heavy recovery gear. The gas station became, for a short, strange week, a reluctant little town. Someone painted a small blue paw print on the side of the station sign. Just one, near the bottom, not big enough to see from the interstate, but big enough for truckers who knew the story. It became a private code, a way to say that this place had more than it first showed, that behind the pumps and the flickering cooler and the bored clerk, there was a hidden line on the map leading to a circle of stones and a dog that had pointed the way. In the months that followed, the details shifted in the telling. Some said the puppy had walked all the way out to the basin and back every morning, waiting for a day when someone would finally follow. Some swore the water had been bone dry until the animal arrived, and the storm shook something loose underground. Stories did what they always did. They stretched. One thing stayed the same. Every driver who had been there remembered the heat, the taste of that cold water on a day when their own calculations had run out, and the way a small animal, abandoned at a desert gas station, had stood right at the edge of the man-made world and refused to move until someone listened. The station itself remained what it had always been, a tired rectangle of cinderblock and sunburned metal at the edge of nothing. Trucks still pulled in, tanks still filled, receipts still printed. But under all that, running like a second current beneath the concrete, there was now a quiet agreement. If the desert ever moved the roads again, if the signs fell, if the maps on screens went blank for a while, someone would still know that somewhere out there, in a shallow basin marked with stones and old hoof prints, there was water in a cracked tank. And if they had trouble remembering exactly how to find it, all they had to do was look for the small shape in the shade, the dust-colored animal with the patient eyes, and follow where it chose to walk.